Pai nosso, que estais no céu, santificado seja o vosso nome. Venha a nós o vosso reino, seja feita a vossa vontade, assim na terra como no céu, assim na terra como no céu. O pão nosso de cada dia dai-nos hoje, ó Senhor. Perdoai as nossas dívidas, assim como perdoamos aos nossos devedores. Não deixeis cair em tentação, mas livrai-nos de todo o mal. Não deixeis cair em tentação, mas livrai-nos de todo o mal.
Good morning, everyone. Here is the United States Spiritist Federation. I'm Jussara, and today we have again a guest speaker that will be presenting to us this talk about the 10 plagues of Egypt from a Spiritist view, a Spiritist perspective. So we have Álvaro Mordechai with us. Álvaro is a Spiritist speaker with talks based on his studies of the Old Testament. He speaks fluently Hebrew, among other languages, and studied and learned Jewish laws and customs through years of living in Jerusalem. He aims to combine the knowledge of the interpretation of the Bible's sacred texts through the wisdom of the Jewish people with the gospel of Jesus under the light of Spiritism. He gives lectures and conferences in Brazil and abroad. And he's also a promoter and coordinator of group trips of the humanitarian organization Fraternity Without Borders. Álvaro is the second time he is with us, and we were really happy to have him again, because all this knowledge and this understanding from the Old Testament and making a connection with a new one, it's something that he has been dedicating for quite a while, and it enriches us here in terms of us as Spiritists as well understand better the scriptures that we have received from the 4 Gospels as well. So, but before we start, we would like to say our prayers, and we invite every one of you to follow us in our prayers. So we elevate our thoughts, unite our hearts, asking for the guidance and protection of our Heavenly Creator, that we may be assisted in our endeavors to improve ourselves, to learn more with an aim to understand and to put in practice in our daily lives. We thank the good spirits that have been assisting us in this work of disseminating love and enlightenment in the English language, so that all our brothers and sisters can also learn and understand more about Spiritism and its set of knowledge. We ask for protection and guidance for our dear friend Álvaro, and we ask permission to start our talk this morning. Alvaro, thank you so much for being here today with us. And we are so looking forward to learn with you about the 10 plagues of Egypt now under this Spiritist perspective. Thank you.
Good morning, Jussara, and everyone who is listening to us. Each invitation that we receive to be here talking in English, it's a personal challenge. And I know that my English is far from being good, but I hope in some way for those who doesn't has access to understanding Portuguese, we can help with bringing some light into hearts and minds. And I hope that it will be easy to understand today. Today we're going to talk about the 10 plagues of Egypt, but we are not trying just to tell this story because it has been already told and it's written in the book of Exodus. So what we are trying to do is to bring the light of the Spiritism, and we are trying to understand the moral and the divine laws that are behind this text. So our challenge here today is not exactly just to understand the story itself, but is to see how the governor of this planet, the spiritual governor of this planet, Jesus, has been guiding us through the first revelation, the Old Testament, through the Gospels, and through the Spiritism. And we will see that actually it goes together with hands given. We can take a story of 3,000 years ago and we can put it hand by hand, side by side, and we can see that it will bring wisdom to our knowledge, that it will bring understanding into the divine laws. So we are going to talk about the 10 plagues of Egypt, but we are also going to talk about another book that I know that we have it in English 2,000 years ago, that came by the mediumship of Francisco Cândido Xavier through the Spirit Emmanuel. So to understand, first, we must look at this text and see that we have many symbols, many metaphorical way of saying things that from now, our days, it's far beyond our understanding. So we are going to talk about the Hebrew people that wants to go out from the slavery in the land of Egypt. Let's understand that the Hebrew people, it's actually the will that it's inside each and every one of us, our spirit, inner will to connect to God. When we are talking about the Egyptians, we are talking actually of the will to connect to the physical world. We are talking about the passion, that human passion that comes from also inside of our immoral or our moral difficulties, our moral imperfections, this will to connect to the physical world. So when we are going to talk about Moses here, we are talking about the light of the conscience that wants to guide us from our own Egypt. We're not just talking about story. Of course, we know that there's story in this text, but we just want to take here the spirit of the letters. So let's understand a little bit more. It will be easier during the plagues. The first plague of Egypt. It said that Moses went to the Pharaoh and asked that he wants to break with the Jewish people free from Egypt. It's the conscience that comes to our spirit and says, you need to break free from your moral addictions or immoral addictions, from your moral imperfections. But the Pharaoh that here represents the personification of this will to connect to the physical world, says, no, I will not allow you to go free. And this slavery that we live is the slavery of our spirit, that after getting connected too much with this physical world, we create a fluidic way that we get slaves to our spirit, to our moral imperfections. So in this way, the Pharaoh will say, no, you cannot go out from Egypt. And Moses will say, okay, a plague will come to the Egypt. And now the water of the Egypt became blood. The Nile rivers became blood. The water that was inside buckets, bottles, and each and every place that there was water, it became blood. So what's the meaning of this? For 7 days, it's written in the book of Exodus. And we cannot believe that someone can live 7 days without water. So the oral tradition of the Jewish people comes to us and say that actually the Pharaoh asked his guards, his army, to make some holes around the Nile River. And just in these places, there was water. So what we do understand here? We understand that in a metaphorical way, that actually God is not punishing people, but we have immoral imperfection into our spirit. It's cause, and it will bring effect into the world. So if I do have an immoral imperfection in my spirit, and I don't want to face and to break free from my own Egypt, I will collect the effects that it caused into my life. So let's say that I make this lecture, and in the end, Jussara comes to me and say, you need to improve your English, you need to improve your explaining because it's difficult to understand you. And I say, no, you are wrong. Although she's right, I say, no, you are wrong. Listen to me. I'm doing what I can. And we fight. I stay very mad with her, and she stays very mad with me, but she just wants to guide me, that I would improve my speaking, my lecture, my life, my spiritism. But I have a moral imperfection, and I'm so selfishness, and I don't want to listen to her. So what do? I need to change, because I don't want to face my moral imperfection. I need to change the way I'm guiding myself in this physical world. So let's say in 1 month I go to New York and I'm walking in the 50th Avenue and I see Jussara there. I say, oh, I don't want to meet her because she's so boring with me. She was so mad. Actually, it's my imperfection that didn't accept what she was trying to tell to help me. So I just crossed to the other sidewalk and I said, okay, next trip I don't come to New York anymore because I don't want to meet her. It's my imperfection that it's bringing me difficulties, that here the symbol is the plague into this physical world. So if you were living in your house and you had water there, now if you want to brush your teeth, to drink water, if you want to take shower, for wherever you need the water, you didn't have it anymore in your house. So you have to change in the physical world the way you were behaving. So you have to walk far, far, far away to take some water and then to use it in your life. But what do we learn from this plague? What more can we learn? We learn that the water is cold, the blood is warm. So actually, when we are living in this physical world, sometimes we start to lose heat. We start to lose energy on serving God in each and every moment of our lives. So we start to being cold when serving God. And this imperfection, this difficulty that my spirit lives, bring change into my life in the physical world. So how is this going to be in the book 2,000 years ago? In the beginning of the book, we see the senator Publius Lentulus living with his wife, Livia Lentulus, daughter, Flavia Lentulus, son, Mark Lentulus, and he had a dream. He had a dream that he was the reincarnation of his great-grandfather. Senator Publius Lentulus, he saw in his dreams that he was his reincarnation. And this is difficult for them because Roman people, they didn't believe in reincarnation. So, but this sticks into his head. And someday he was with his great best friend, Flaminius Severus, that he was also a senator in Rome. And he tells about his dream. And he shows that even physically, with a sculpture that he had of his great-grandfather, they even looked physically very much. And this was making sense. But what he believed, what he saw in his dreams, is that his great-grandfather has blood in his hands, and he was not a very good guy. So what he decides that when he was going to reincarnate in this world, there were very high, elevated spirits that comes to him and tell that he is going to live in this world to correct what he did in the past. He was very confused, but this is his conscience, that each and every vicissitude that he's going to live in through his life, it's gonna be guiding him. And he's going to know that in his conscience, everything that's happening in his life, expiation, trials, proofs, it was connected to his past. Flaminius Severus, his great friend, didn't believe very much, but he was thinking about this. After some while, the little daughter Flavia of Senator Publius Lentulus becomes sick. She had a disease in her skin. And this disease, the medicine of that days could not cure. So they have to move in a physical world the way they were living, exactly as we see in the first plague of Egypt. They were living in Rome, and they needed to move and live in Israel because in Israel the weather was better for this kind of disease. So they are gonna change physically, as I told in the story. I move it from one sidewalk to the another sidewalk because in my spirit I didn't accept my imperfection. So the vicissitude becomes heavy and difficult. If I would understand that I need to change myself into my spirit with self-knowledge and great efforts, then it would be easier to face this. And the same thing happens with Senator Publius Lentulus. Why? Because he will not accept that this is part of the vicissitudes that he had to live. And he will say, you know who is the fault of my daughter being sick? It's from all these dirt slaves that comes from all over the world and then bring the disease for Rome. And now I have to move to Israel, not because of my life, my purpose in this physical world, the purpose of my reincarnation, but actually he was very mad that he needed to move to Israel. This is our first plague of Egypt. We have to remind always that we cannot lose energy when serving God, and through every day living through vicissitudes, it's very easy to lose this connection to God. Second plague of Egypt. Moses goes to the Pharaoh and says, can you release the Jewish people? We need to go to the desert and we need to make sacrifice for God and we need to make our living. And the Pharaoh says, no, I will not allow. Conscience of Senator Publius Lentulus comes to him and say, break free from your own Egypt. But his egoism, his selfishness, his pride, his arrogance, pride in a bad way, that didn't allow him to break free from his own Egypt. So Moses says, a big plague will come to Egypt. And here, when we are seeing the plague in the life of Senator Publio we are seeing that it's not a punishment of God, but it is a effect of a moral imperfection that lives in his spirits. Yet, in our spirit, second plague, frogs. Moses said that frogs will come from Nilo River and it will infestate all the Egypt. So what happens here? What's the understanding of this? If first, in the first plague, I could, in this material world, change the way of my life. Let's say I move it from one sidewalk. Senator Publio he moved it from Rome to Israel. Now you cannot run away because it's written that frogs were everywhere, in the house, in the kitchen. It's even written in the oven. In the oven? What's the understanding of this? So first, you just move in a physical world. Now, even if you move, you're going to sleep, you see a frog in your bed, okay, I will sleep in the ground, but the noise of the frog echoes into your head. It sticks to your head, this noise, and everywhere you go, you will listen, at least to the noise of the frog. So, what we are understanding here, in the first plague, we said, water is cold, blood is warm. Here, the oven, says the oral tradition of the Jewish people, is hot, and the frog is cold. We have to have energy into our lives when acting every day, but we have to take very good care. Because if we put too much energy, we will become, what's the word? I forgot the word. Fundamentalist. We will become fundamentalist into our deeds. And this is exactly what we are going to see in the life of Senator Publio. Why? Because they arrive in Israel and he takes his family and a lot of soldiers of the Roman army, and they are going to Jerusalem, where he's going to meet Pontius Pilatus, that was the governor of the Judea. And when he's going through this way, he is going to face a difficulty. A young man that calls Shaul of Joras, he's going to take a stone and he's going to throw to hit the face of Senator Publio. Of course, because he was connected to the Jewish rebels and they hated the Romans. So when he see that senator with all his clothes, he could identify that he was a senator. He was a very important Roman person. He throws the stone, but the stone doesn't hit the face of the Senator Publio. It hits the face of his wife, Livia Lentulus. And Senator Publio, he acts exactly with too much energy. And he starts beating this guy with all the soldiers. And Livia Lentulus says, no, stop beating him. But Senator Publio, he was so full of arrogance and energy to put in his moral imperfection that he says, no, so I will send him to the galley. That it was the most terrible, the most difficult way of punishing someone, because he is going to die in few months as a slave in this galleys. So what happens? That is Shaul Joras, he is arrested, and during the night, a group of people who use it to kidnap slaves, to sell them in Rome, passes and see this guy arrested in some place, Shaul Joras. The young man who throws the stone, he was arrested and they kidnap him. They kidnap and he's sold for these smugglers of slaves to Rome. But in the next day, in the morning, comes a man to him and says, My name is Andrew of Joras, and I am the father of Shaul of Joras. Please, can you release him from the punishment you give? I am a father. I'm asking you as a father. I know you are a father also, Senator Publio Lentulus. Please, I ask you, release my son. And he knew that this guy was disappeared, and he thought probably he ran it away in this night and he will arrive into his father's home. But he was so full of arrogance. He was a slave in his own Egypt of the arrogance, and he says, no, listen, Andrew of Joras, I will not do this. And Andrew of Joras says to him, you are gonna know into your life what's to have an enemy. And here we have the second plague in the life of Senator Publio Lentulus. He put too much energy in what he was doing. And because he was a slave into his own Egypt, he will find the consequences of his deeds into his life. Third plague of Egypt, Kinim, lices. What's license? What's the difference? Moses goes to the Pharaoh, asks that he wants to set the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, free, and the Pharaoh doesn't allow, and he says that the third plague will come to the land of Egypt. The conscience asks Senator Publio Lentulus that he must break free from his own slavery, in his moral imperfections, and in this way, the Pharaoh that lives inside him says, no, you're not going to break free from my slavery. So what's the difference of lices into frogs? The difference is that in the second plague, the noise echoes into our heads, but the lices, it sticks to our heads. It stays in contact into our head, and you cannot run away from it anymore. It's when the moral imperfection that we live, it's so strong, and the consequences is growing because we are not doing anything to set our spirit free from it. We are not putting any efforts. So this stays strong, and each time stronger into our lives, the consequence. So the license stays together, eating our skin. So this is the third plague. What we should learn, that as the license, we have to be very small into our lives, and we have to do our work wherever we are planted. We have to do our job to God, connected to God. So what's the third plague in the life of Senator Publius Lentulus? He will arrive into Jerusalem, and the governor Pontius Pilatus received his family, but Livia Lentulus, she was a very beautiful woman. And when Pontius Pilatus sees her, he wants to flirt with her. And in some time after the dinner, they are going to walk into the garden where Pontius Pilatus used to have his palace in Jerusalem. And when they are walking, he goes to Livia and he starts flirting with her. Of course, Livia will not correspond him, will not answer positively to him. But what we see here is that there's a woman by the name Fulvia that sees what's happening there, and she was very jealous of Livia Lentulus. She couldn't believe how she was beautiful and kind, and she would be so good with everybody around her. So she decides to tell Senator Publio Lentulus what's happening, but she will lie. She will say she was making a lot of combinations with Pontius Pilatus. So here we see the jealousy of Senator Publio Lentulus as the third plague into his life. And Joanna de Angelis will say that jealousy can bring its victim to madness. You can become crazy. As lices into your head, it brings you so mad that you can become crazy about. This is the third plague of Egypt. The fourth plague of Egypt out of wild animals. Moses goes to the Pharaoh once again and asks that he needed to set the Hebrew people free from the land of Egypt. And he doesn't allow. So he says that the fourth plague will come and wild animals once again would infestate the Egypt. We already told that what we are seeing here, that the plagues are not punishment of God, but are consequence of our moral imperfections. And because we are not changing our spirit, we doesn't want to break free from our spirit, from our moral imperfection. So the pain starts to grow into our lives, not showing that God is punishing, but actually that he has mercy, and he doesn't send a very strong pain that we cannot hold into our lives, but gradually grows into our lives. In this fourth plague, we see the wild animals infestating the Egypt, and we will see in the book 2,000 years ago that what's going to happen is Senator Publius Lentulus, because Livia Lentulus and her slave Anna would ask him to meet Jesus. Today we're not gonna talk about this chapter 5 of the first part of the book, the meeting of Senator Publius Lentulus with Jesus, but it's one of the hottest point in the book. So here we will see that Flavia Lentulus, the daughter of the senator, she would be cured by Jesus. But the senator Publius Lentulus didn't accept that Jesus cured her. So what happens? He goes he goes back into his house. Flavia Lentulus is cured. She doesn't have anymore this skin disease, and they were ready to go out of the land of Israel. But this guy, Andrew of Joras, the father of Shaul of Joras, that we talk about them in the beginning of the speech, he decides to kidnap the son of Senator Publius Lentulus. So we see here the wild animals going inside the house of Senator Publius Lentulus, exactly as is told in the book of Exodus, that the wild animals went inside the house, the palace of the Pharaoh. So Andrew of Joras, with the help of another slave, he is going to kidnap the son of Senator Publius Lentulus and Livia Lentulus. And they were ready to go out of Israel. They could not go out anymore because they needed to find their son, Marcus Lentulus. We saw here the infesting of Egypt with wild animals. So now we go to the fifth plague of Egypt, devil, pestilence. Once again, Moses goes to the Pharaoh and asks him to set the Hebrew people free from the land of Egypt. And the Pharaoh say, no, you are my slaves, and I will not allow you to go out. Exactly like in the life of Senator Publius Lentulus, when his conscience, once again, asks him in each and every vicissitude of his life that he should use all the vicissitudes to make his spirit free from the moral addictions that he was living. So, Dever says that the pestilence will come to the land of Egypt, and it will kill all the animals, all the cattle, all the camels, all the horses, all the animals of the land of Egypt. But here we have to look careful to this moment, because afterwards we will see when the Jewish people, after the 10th plague, when the Jewish people can break free and can go to the desert, we will see the army of the Pharaoh persecuting the Hebrew people through the desert, and we will see that the book will say that the army of the Pharaoh had horses and had a lot of animals. So what's the point of saying in this plague that all the animals of Egypt were dead? Actually, the oral tradition of the Jewish people says that not all the animals were infested by this pestilence, but actually some of the Egyptian people, they were afraid of God, but they were not doing good and helping to release the Jewish people. They were afraid of the consequence of doing wrong stuff and going against the Hebrew people, but they were not good enough to help them. So because they were afraid, they took their animals and they put inside their house. And all these animals that were kept inside their house, this is the animal that the arm of the Pharaoh will use to persecute the Jewish people afterwards. So what's the meaning of this? We see in the question 642 in the book of Spirit. It's asked by Kardec, is it enough to simply not to do what is evil in order to please God and to ensure our future happiness? Is it enough not to do bad, not to do evil? And the spirits are going to answer, no, we must do good to the best of our abilities. Each of you will have to answer for all the evil that has resulted from the good that you have failed to do. So all these animals are all the time that into our spirit we are just afraid of the consequence, but we are not also doing the good. These animals, in the metaphorical way of saying in the book of Exodus, that they were safe inside their house of the Egyptian people, they are going to persecute our spirit with consequence because we didn't make our best efforts to do good into our lives. So here is exactly what we see in this fifth plague. But what happens in the book 2000 years ago? In the book, we see that Anna, the slave of Senator Publio Lentulus and Livia Lentulus, she became very good friend of Livia Lentulus. And she was a Christian, and she used to listen to the words of Jesus. When she knew that Jesus was going to pass through some place, she would go there and listen to his speeches to see how Jesus was acting. And she knows that her good friend, Livia Lentulus, she had her heart broken because Marcus Lentulus could not be found, and she was living misery into her life, living in Israel. So she invites Livia Lentulus to go with her and listen to the words of Jesus. Livia, that she was a missionary in this book, we will see that she says to Anna, listen, I go with you, but I want one clothes of this that you wear, because I don't know that everybody will look at me and sees me as a Roman patrician. And I don't want that they will see me like that, so I will wear the clothes of a Hebrew slave. And she dressed these clothes and she goes, and the book says that she's listening in that day to the mountain sermon. When she goes back into her home, she will meet her husband, Senator Publio Lentulus, and he will not accept. When he see that she's wearing the clothes of a Hebrew slave, she say, you are a Roman patrician. How can you wear these clothes? Where you were? She says, I went to listen to the words of Jesus. But I don't want you to listen to the word of Jesus. So they are living the fifth plague in their life because their hearts will be broken and they will be affected living inside their home. They will live with very great difficulties into their lives. So once again, we see that the plague is not a punishment, but this is a consequence of the heart of Senator Publio Lentulus that didn't want to accept that he and she should understand the lessons of Jesus, the lessons that comes into his conscience, and he knew that all these vicissitudes through his dream was important through his life. But he was not ready to accept this. He was so arrogant. He had so much difficulty with his pride in a bad way that he couldn't understand. So they are gonna live a lot of difficulties into their lives. So we go to the sixth plague of Egypt. The sixth plague, it's sherim in Hebrew, boils. Boils, we understand that it's inflammation into our skin. If we take wheat and we put fist in it, it's going to grow and look much bigger than it really is. The wheat becomes much bigger when it becomes bread. So what's doing the pride into our lives? Pride in a bad way. When we become arrogant, we want to be seen by others much bigger, much greater, much better, in much a better way that we actually are. So these boils into the skin shows that the arrogance of the pride comes as a plague in the life of Senator Publio Lentulus. So in the life of Senator Publio Lentulus in the book 2,000 years ago, Senator Publio Lentulus, is with his wife in Jerusalem because it was Passover, and in Passover all the Roman people, Roman army, Roman governors, Roman senators that were living in Israel used to go to Jerusalem because it was a difficult time. It was dangerous because millions of Jews used to be in Jerusalem for Passover. So if there would be some difficult, some rebellion, they should be there to take care of this. So they are in Jerusalem for the Passover, and Anna, the slave of Livia Lentulus, comes to her and say, Livia, Jesus are going to be crucified today. You must do something. You must help Jesus. You are a wife of senator. Ask him. You should ask him. But she couldn't, because as we saw in the fifth plague, the pain that they have in their house, in their home, now would grow. And because they are not together and they were fighting very much, and Senator Publio Lentulus was jealous and he couldn't understand the life that Livia chose for her, so she couldn't talk to him. So she decides to talk to Pontius Pilatus. He was the governor. And of course, he would accept to talk to her. So Livia Lentulus goes to the palace of Pontius Pilatus, and in that exactly moment, there was having a meeting where Senator Publio Lentulus and many other people were together with Pontius Pilatus. Someone comes to Pontius Pilatus and say, listen, the wife of Senator Publio Lentulus, Livia Lentulus, wants to talk to you. And of course, he was very attracted to her. He says, okay, I go immediately. And when he goes, he tries once again his ways to have something sexually with Livia Lentulus. Of course, she will not accept this, and he will not listen to her. And when she was a woman that was jealous of Livia Lentulus, and that one that couldn't understand how she was so kind into her heart and so beautiful and such a good person, that she calls Senator Publio Lentulus and say, you see, you didn't believe me in the beginning. Now you see that Livia Lentulus is going out from the room of Senator Poncio Pilatus. And you see how I was telling the truth, and Livia all the time was just lying about. When Senator Publio Lentulus see this, he has his heart destroyed. In his conscience, he know that this was not happening, but he couldn't even listen to her to understand what was happening through his life. He was so arrogant that he couldn't listen to her. He was living the sixth plague into his own Egypt, where the vicissitude is just asking that he should listen to his conscience and should reflect how he was acting into his life. So this is the sixth plague of Egypt, seventh plague of Egypt. Hail, barad. What is hail? It's ice stones that comes from the sky. It's a rain of ice stones. But what's ice? It's water. What's the understanding of water into the Jewish tradition? This is the representation, is the symbol of goodness, of kindness, how we should act into our lives. Why? Because when we see a river, the water flowing, we see that when it meets an obstacle, a stone, the water will just deflect from the stone, but it will not stop doing its work. It respects the obstacle. It changes its direction. The water changes its direction, but it doesn't stop making good, making transformation into others, into this world. So if we see the Grand Canyon, we can be sure that the water changed its direction for many times, but we see in thousands or millions of years the work it has done. So it means for the Hebrew people, it's the symbol of kindness, of goodness. But when it becomes ice, it doesn't flow anymore. It doesn't make its job. So there's a great rabbi that says that the oral tradition of the Jewish people says that this barad, that this rail was different because it had fire inside. But it's not possible to have fire and water. Why is this rabbi telling us this about the seventh plague? Water and fire together. This is not possible. Of course, once again, it's a metaphorical way of explaining something. It's a parable. So, if water is kindness, goodness, we will see the fire as angry when we become very angry. So, we have different and opposite ways, emotions in the same place connected. And it's written that two opposite things can just be living together if they have God into their lives, because God equalizes with wisdom, with knowledge, with love, each and every opposite emotions and opposite things in this life. So what's trying to do to tell us this seventh plague? That we have to equalize the difference that we find into our lives during our lifetime, during our vicissitudes. We have to equalize with love, with wisdom, with knowledge, connecting ourselves to God. So here we see this seventh plague of Egypt in the book 2,000 years ago, when Senator Publio Lentulus, after almost 25 years trying to find his son, Marcus Lentulus, and they could not find, they even couldn't know if he was even alive. They decide to go back to Rome because in Rome, his great friend, Senator Flaminius Severus, he was almost dying. And he wanted to talk to him because they were very good friends. And all these years that he has been living in Israel, who was taking care of his business, his properties in the Roman Empire, was his great friend. So he goes back to Rome with Livia Lentulus, Anna Lentulus, Flavia Lentulus, and when he comes to Rome, Flavia Lentulus falls in love with the son of Flaminius Severus, Plinius Severus, and they would marry. But Plinius Severus, he was not a very good guy. He used to drink alcohol very much. He used to live his life in parties, and he used to cheat on Flavia. So he sees this as a plague into his life. But not just this. That guy from the beginning of the book that was kidnapped as a slave and he was sold as a slave in Rome, he would be sold to the family of Flaminius Severus. But Senator Publius Lentulus would not recognize him. And he was already a free man because Flaminius Severus had a good heart. And after many years of work said, okay, you can become a free man. And he was working and now he was a rich guy. And when he sees Senator Publius Lentulus, he wanted very much. He was very crazy, very mad with him, and he was very angry. But when he sees Flavia, his daughter, the daughter of Senator Publius Lentulus, he falls in love with her. And he decides that he would try to marry her in some way, even though now she was married with Plinius Severus. So we see here the seventh plague in the life of Senator Publius Lentulus. So we go to the eighth plague of Egypt. Moses goes to the Pharaoh once again and says, you must set the Hebrew people free from the slavery in Egypt. Once again, just to understand, the conscience of Senator Publius Lentulus comes to him and says to him, you must break free from your own slavery into your own Egypt. You must break free from all the moral imperfections that you have into your spirit. You have to break free from the human passions that's guiding you instead of you guiding your human passions. You should break free. But yet, although Senator Publius Lentulus had a lot of pain, that actually this was like a compass that is trying to bring reflections how he should live his life, how he should act when he's finding all these vicissitudes, all this challenge that the material world, that our reincarnation puts in this world of trials and proofs. So he's not going to set him free. The eighth plague is locust. We understand that the rain, when it comes, when it rains, when we have a rainstorm, it will affect all the vegetables. But still, although the rain in Egypt made a devastation, yet they have cereals that they use to have into their homes. They have some fruits. They have yet what to eat. So this is the reason why the Pharaoh didn't want yet to release the Hebrew people. So when it comes the locust, it will devastate every food and everything they had to eat in the land of Egypt, and it will infestate in all the land of Egypt. But it's written something here in the book of Exodus, that all the land of Egypt was so full of locusts that the land, the furniture, the house, it all becomes black. And the oral tradition of the Jewish people asks why it's written that everything became black, in the dark. Why? Because, says the Talmud, that someone that lives the life without a compass, it's like living in the darkness. You don't know where you are going. So you must have a compass into your life that will guide you, and you know where you should go. The gospel is a very good compass. It's the best compass you can have. And if you live like that, you're not in the dark. You know where you have to walk. You know that you have vicissitudes, and you have to do the best you can. And you know that you have goals, and you have direction, and you have a compass into your life. So this is the eighth plague in the life of Senator Publius Lentulus in the land of Egypt. In the book 2,000 years ago, what happens? Calpurnia, that she was the wife of Flaminius Severus, that now he was dead already, she was almost dying, and she calls Senator Publius Lentulus. And she says to the Senator Publius Lentulus that she knew actually everything that happened in the life of Senator Publius Lentulus with Livia Lentulus. And she was 100% sure that Livia Lentulus would never cheat Senator Publius Lentulus. She was 100% sure. And she now could understand in the last days of her life that Livia Lentulus, she had a very good heart, and that the Romans were not ready to understand how her heart was following Jesus. But now, Calpurnia, could understand. She could understand what happened into the life of Livia Lentulus. And she advises Senator Publius Lentulus that he should forgive, and he should go and talk to his wife, because they were already more than 30 years without talking one to another. So the Senator Publius Lentulus, that he didn't have this compass in his life. He had his conscience, but he doesn't accept the suggestion of his conscience, the guidance of his conscience. So what was happening here? We see that he says, okay, I'm gonna receive a great medal from the emperor, and after I receive this, after all the world will know that I'm such a great man to the Roman Empire, I will go and I will ask her to forgive me, and I will say that now I understand that she didn't do anything against me, and she was doing her better, and actually that I was wronging to myself. And the book of Exodus says in this plague that the Pharaoh, exactly as the Senator Publius Lentulus, sees that he had made great mistakes with the Hebrew people. So here we see that the Senator Publius Lentulus that could go in the exactly moment and ask her to forgive. He will not do this. He will wait for 1-2 days after he will receive this great medal, after he will receive this great honor of the Roman Emperor. And one night before, the slave of Livia Lentulus, Anna, she was a Christian and living in Rome, that it was not allowed to have Christian meetings. So the Christians would meet inside the catacombs, under the ground, in the catacombs of Rome. So she comes to Livia and say that John Cleophas, he was coming to Rome, and he was going to talk how was his experience living with Jesus. He would make speech and he will talk about Jesus, and she invites Livia to go with her that night. So they go to the catacombs, and when they are leaving this meeting, and they are living with the words of love of the Gospels, the Roman soldiers comes to this catacomb and they arrest every Christian that they were there. And they take them to the jail and they say that in the next morning they would be given as martyrs, they would be thrown into the Circus Maximus, where the Christians, the first Christians, would face the lions, all the beasts that they were eaten as martyrs. So when Livia sees what was happening, she knew that they couldn't kill her because she was dressing as a Roman patrician, and it was not allowed. Knowing this, but knowing that she had lived in a misery in the point of view of this material world, but actually her heart was ready to give her life to Jesus. So she says to Anna, Anna, my slave, I ask you to change clothes with me. And in this moment, I ask you that I want to die as a Hebrew slave, and you can wear my clothes. So in the next morning, when the Emperor Nero was with Senator Publius Lentulus in the Circus Maximus, they were seeing that all these Christians, they were going to be eaten by these wild animals in this arena. So when they are throwing everybody into this arena, they see this Roman patrician that now was Anna, the slave. And they say, you are not going to die. You can go away. But she wanted to die. She doesn't want to go away. And when she comes into the house of Senator Publius Lentulus, he's expecting that he will come. And when he is ready to apologize for Livia, Anna tells what happens. And here he is living the most terrible plague of his life. And he has his heart devastated. But here we don't see yet that Senator Publius Lentulus wants to break free from the slavery of his spirit. Yet the pain was not strong enough that will touch his heart. So we go for the 9th plague of Egypt. Now just the two last plagues, and then we finish our speech today. So the 9th plague of Egypt, it is darkness, choshech in Hebrew, darkness. So Moses goes to the Pharaoh and says that he wants that the Pharaoh will set the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, free from the land of Egypt. And the Pharaoh was not ready. Exactly what was happening into the spirit of Senator Publius Lentulus, and maybe it can be happening with us. So in this moment, all the dark will become, with all the Egypt, would become so dark that there was no light. There was no light in all the land of Egypt. It's written that just in the land of Goshen, where the Hebrew people used to live, there was a bit of light, a light. So what do we learn from this? We should learn that even if you are living in Egypt, you should be light, because the light takes you out from Egypt. So what happens in the book 2,000 years ago? Nero has finished his empire, and now Vespasiano was the new empire of Rome. And he was a good friend of Senator Publius Lentulus. So he calls Senator Publius Lentulus, and he calls another senator, Pompilio Crasso, and he says that he was needing help because the land of Israel, there was great rebellion happening there in that moment, and he needed people that knew very much the land of Israel, and they would help the Roman army. So Senator Publio Lentulus and this friend Pompilio Crassus, senator also, they will go to the land of Israel once again, and they will help Titus, that afterwards he will also become empire in Roman history. So in this moment, we see that they are helping in the fights with the army, but in some point they are kidnapped. Pompilio Crassus and Senator Publio Lentulus, they are kidnapped by these rebels, and they were taken to a very dark place. And when he listens to a voice that says to him, Senator Publio Lentulus, many, many years I expected for this moment. And when he sees Andrew of Joras, the father of Shaul of Joras, the one who said that he would know what's to live with an enemy in this world, he sees him, and he was one of the leaders of the rebels. And in this moment, he says, now I will ask my slave Italus to make you blind. And he takes something and says to his slave Italo, but this slave, he was so different. He was not Hebrew. He looks very, very much as a Roman guy. And Senator Publio Lentulus, although all this was happening, he was attracted to this guy, and he couldn't understand what was happening. So this Italo, the slave of Andrew of Joras, makes the Senator Publio Lentulus blind. He has, as the ninth plague, he has darkness into his life. And in this moment, when he is blind, the Roman troops would go inside this place, and in this moment, they would kill Italus, the slave, but they would not kill Andrew of Joras. They would not kill Simon de Joras of Joras, because they were leaders of this movement, this rebellion. And there was a tradition for the Romans that the leaders, they would go into a parade that it was called the Parade of the Beasts, where this parade would go through Rome, and everybody, all the Roman, would see how they were strong and how their animals were very weak. And they had this tradition for Roman people. And in the head of Senator Publio Lentulus, he could not understand, although he was blind, red, he had so much pain into his life, but he was yet full of arrogance, and he could not ask Andrew of Joras, because he was a Hebrew, he was a Jewish guy, and he was a Roman, he was royal, he was such a great guy. How could he talk with a Jewish guy, a slave? So he would not ask him, who is this guy, Italo? But he wanted very much to know, because this guy, he was so similar to him. There was something in him, and he knew he was Roman. So who is this guy? So we go here to the 10th plague of Egypt, that in Hebrew it's Makat Bechorot. It's the death of the firstborn. Moses asks the Pharaoh to set the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, free from Egypt, but the Pharaoh would not accept. But Moses says that this plague are going to be very strong. And now the firstborns of the Egypts would be dead. They would have their death in that day, in that night, in the middle of that night. And after this, Moses says that even though the Pharaoh didn't want to set them free, although he didn't want to set them free, they would go free. So what happens in the book 2000 years ago. The Senator Publius Lentulus, he was arrested in Rome, and he saw that all the things that happened in the land of Israel, he could not forget. And he needed to know who was this slave called Italo. So Andrew of Judas, he was arrested in the prison Marmentine, and he decides to go down from his arrogance. He decides to go down into this prison, and he will ask Andrew of Judas. When he goes inside the prison, he was blind and he had so much pain into his life that when he goes down, Andrew of Judas says to him, "Forgive me, please. When your son Marcus Lentulus, he was a kid, I kidnapped him because I wanted you to know how was my pain, the pain into my heart. So I joined the rebels and I wanted to make from your life misery. So I kidnapped your son, and Italo, actually, he was your son, Marcus Lentulus." So we see here the death of the son of Senator Publius Lentulus. And in this moment of the text, in this moment of the life, one of the reincarnations of the Spirit Emmanuel, Senator Publius Lentulus, exactly like it happens in the book of Exodus, he will go out from his Egypt because the pain was so strong. And he sees that all the plagues that he lived into his life, actually, he was causing them because of his immoral imperfection. And he reminds the dream that he had and what was the purpose of this reincarnation. The purpose was to set free from this Egypt, from his own Egypt, from his own moral addictions. And now he will have in his conscience a new day, a new light. And in the next book that Emmanuel will write to us 50 years later, we will see the spirit of Emmanuel, Senator Publius Lentulus, being born as a slave, a Hebrew slave, and he will start his directions, his way through the desert, to the self-introspection, and he will use now his conscience as a guide, and he will connect his heart to Jesus. It's written in the beginning of the book that this book 2000 years ago, it was given as a compass to our lives, where Senator Publius Lentulus tells his story, Emmanuel tells us, writes to us the story of the reincarnation of the senator. Arrogance, selfishness, egoism, a lot of pride, in the most terrible way that we can understand pride. And he will show to us all the mistakes that he had in this reincarnation, that we will use this to understand what we must do into our lives. Michelangelo Buonarroti, he used it to say that when he used it to see a rough block of marble, he would see inside that rough block of marble the most beautiful sculpture that always has been there. But to take out the sculpture from it, the sculpture needs a sculptor, a chisel, where he hits the rough marble just to take what doesn't belong. The most beautiful sculpture that Michelangelo Buonarroti used it to bring for the history of humanity. And our soul, our spirit, it's like a rough marble block that we are full of imperfections, Of course, we can learn through the language of love, but we are so full of arrogance. We are such kind of people that we are yet maybe slaves into our own Egypt. And through the hits of the chisel of the sculptor, it takes out from the rough marble the moral imperfection that actually this doesn't belong to our spirit. And it will bring the most great sculpture that actually the sculpture is God. And with his divine providence, he is guiding us, and there is no suffering, there is no pain, there is no moral imperfection that will stay with us for the eternity. And what will become from our spirit is the most beautiful sculpture of God, the purification of our spirits through the multiple reincarnations that we live. So in this text of Exodus, joining and make this through the light of the Spiritism, we can understand that maybe we are yet living into our land of Egypt, but with our own efforts, living our lives with the connection of God, maybe we can go out from our Egypt. Or if we already went out from it, maybe we can help, as Emmanuel is telling us his story in the book 2000 years ago, showing what's the compass, what's the direction that these pure spirits made to get into the point where they are living. So here we finish today this lecture, this speech. I apologize once again. My terrible English, sometimes I think it's not possible even to understand. But I hope the message was clear. Jusara, your speaker, it's not.
It was so beautiful. The whole perspective that you found to explain to us the 10 plagues and how everything is connected. Sometimes I think we forget that there are much more connections than we think, much more symbolism that has to be analyzed and really in the form of eternal perennial lessons. And the way you bring that to our emotions, to the experiences that each one of us live in their lives. And I'm sure that by hearing your talk, by hearing what you said, all of us, I mean, it resonates in all of us, and in moments that we had to give testimony, even of our faiths, and the transformation we have to go through in order to evolve. So it was really beautiful. And of course, for us Spiritists, when we talk about Emmanuel, the story of Publius is always so dear to our hearts, and we understand, because sometimes, I think that many people read those books not quite understanding that more than just the report of a life, of a story that may, present the ups and downs that we have in life. They were reported by Emmanuel because they bring precious lessons, and he wants to, like an older soul, he wants to share with us his knowledge and his experience, and trying to teach us how we can as well endure, but at the same time, with those lessons, grow. But so thank you very much. It was really, really beautiful. You're actually going to hear it again. And the English was very, very good. I mean, we all have our accents. There is no way we can escape from that. So don't worry, it was very, very good. We have some questions here. The first one is from Kirsten. Is there any significance between the 10 plagues and what's going on in our world today?
Yes, of course. We know that there's no consequence. There's nothing in this world that is just happening with no sense. And the sense of what we are living today, it's different for each and every one of us. We have to find the ways to be connected with God and to find the way how can we serve God? How can we work as a spirit in this world, living not a plague, but a consequence of the egoism that we made in the history of humanity. So, of course, there's a significance between the 10 plagues and what's happening. So, in our conscience, if we look deeply into our conscience, because it's so easy to make confusion and to use our human passion to not understand the message, the real message that comes from God into our conscience, that comes from the spirits into our conscience. So if we look in a very reasonable way and we try to listen to our conscience, we will understand what's the purpose individually into our lives for why we are living today in these days, this not plague, but this consequence that we have to trust God and we have to be sure that the divine providence is guiding us. And we know that it's difficult, but it's in the difficult moments of our lives that we have to break free from the slavery of our soul, the slavery of our moral imperfection. And now we are called to work in the ways that it's possible in these days for the Gospels, to work as the hands of Jesus, as the mouth of Jesus, praying for each and every one of the souls that and brothers of humanity and sisters that are living difficult into these days.
Okay, thank you. We have another one here. Yasko is saying, I felt from the parallel you're wonderfully brought of Publius trials. Pride is the origin of all our moral imperfections. That is to say, vanity, jealousy, arrogance. Spiritism tips to control pride.
Spiritist tips? What's tips?
It means gives any advices for us to control pride.
Yeah, self-knowledge. In the question 919, it's told to us that the best way to improve from all the moral imperfections that we have into our spirit, the self-knowledge is the best way to achieve the spirit redemption, to go out from our own Egypt. So through the self-knowledge and great efforts, we can go out from our own Egypt, from this vanity, jealousy, arrogance, and control this pride.
Okay, thank you. Well, there are so many things that people here that said that they were so happy with the talk. It seems like humanity as a whole still had a lot to learn. The same male supremacy still exists within our world today. And this culture of disrespect towards women and anyone viewed as weak is perpetuating until today. How can we, as spiritists, help to stop this cycle of violence?
If we understand that the Spiritism gives us the right instruments for the self-knowledge and to work all our immoral imperfections, and it gives us a perfect compass through the Jesus Gospels, how we must behave into the vicissitudes, into the trials, into the proofs, into every moment of our lives. We will understand that even if one spirit goes out from his own Egypt, it becomes light for all the world. Mahatma Gandhi, he used to say that one heart that learns to love deeply, sincerely, it neutralizes the hate of millions and millions of people. So if we take the lesson that the Spiritism brings to us and we apply it into our lives, we can be sure that we are going to be a great change to this world through changing our own spirit. So what I can see is that the Spiritism brings the right instruments for the right moment to each and every one of us, that probably each and every one living in our personal universe, we have different challenges, different difficulties, but all of us, we have the same goal, to break free from this Egypt and to go to the light of Jesus, to the light of God.
And by the way, Alvaro, Kirsten is English. Is American, so, and she's saying that your English was very well spoken. So, if she's saying that, you really have to not to worry, okay? So I know that she's used it to our English, to our accents, again, as we always say, the important thing is for us to spread the message and the knowledge and everything that you brought. And I think, this last remarks that you just said in terms of how a heart that knows how to love is can really make an impact in the world. I think we lack faith in us as well. And very often we will dismay because of the things that happen to us, because of the things that are happening in the world. And instead of contributing to the light, for the light to spread, we join ourselves with, the powers of darkness, in a way, so to say. So yeah, we have to go through that. And also in terms of, this last question that Kirsten asked, we will see equality prevail. It's been taking a while. We have to say it, but it will change, and we will be going through that. Is the law of progress. So I thank you so much, Alvar. That was a beautiful, beautiful presentation. We are very happy. I'm sure that each time more you are going to be known in the US as well. And when we'll finally be able to come here personally, I'm sure many of the groups here will be more than happy to host you, to have you there, and to share with them, with us all this knowledge and understanding. And I know Alvaro, and I know how much he dedicates and he studies, and he really tries to make a connection, especially from his upbringing, his Jewish upbringing, trying to make the bridge. It's such a terrific thing that he has been doing. And I'm very proud of my godson, Alvaro. So that's it for today, folks. We are going to end our presentation today with yet another prayer. And we would like to invite you for next week. We are going to have a dear friend from the UK, Adam Osborne, and he's going to talk to us about the golden rule. So don't miss it. We have very interesting things for the whole month of August, and we will be here each Saturday at 11 a.m. So we are Now, offering our prayer of gratitude for all the blessings we have received, all the lessons that surely are going to stay with us in our hearts and will help us and lead us to meditate more about our own lives, about our experiences, and how enriching they are, especially the moments where we have to struggle more. Let us ask God for strength. In times such as this one that we are living, we see a lot of suffering around, a lot of difficulties, unfairness. But let us join all of those that are sincerely dedicated to the good of others through prayers, through love, through their actions, through charity, that each and every one may receive in their homes right now the blessings of our Heavenly Creator and be in peace throughout the week. So thank you so much for being with us, Álvaro, and everyone that is following us today. And we will see you again next week.
Bye.
Bye.